Hello, everyone, and welcome to a whole new week of Never Thirst Again. I'm your podcast host, Chrissy Smith, and as always, I am so thrilled that you have decided to join me today. Now, before we get started, I absolutely have to do my due diligence with making sure that I recognize some of the platforms that Never Thirst Again is on. So, the first one is this. If you will go to Amazon Music at www.amazon.com /Never Thirst Again, you can find me there. I'm also on Podbean, Player.fm, and of course, a host of others that will be listed in the description of this episode. Now, now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get started. Well, today I wanted to talk to you about something that's really been on my mind for the past few weeks or so here. I wanted to talk to you guys about the importance of having a trustworthy and competent village to pitch in times of need. And when I say village, I mean, you guys are all familiar with that saying, it takes a village. Well, it takes a village for adults and for children. You know, when I was younger, I remember we could go next door to borrow a couple of eggs or even a cup of sugar if someone was short on the ingredients for making a homemade cornbread or a lemon pound cake. There was a time when all the kids could play outside together, and there were at least three or four adults keeping an eye on each child from looking out the window or just simply rocking back and forth in the rocking chair on the porch. Safety wasn't too much of an issue the way it is now because everybody seemed to look out for each other, especially those who lived in the same neighborhood. Well, things have changed so drastically over the past 25 years or so, or at least they have for me. I'll just say that. We've all gotten so engrossed in being glued to technology in some shape or form that we've simply neglected being able to do small things like verbally ask, "How was your day today?" We simply send text messages now. There was a time when we were able to anticipate each other's needs by just simply having a warm and discerning spirit. But many ignore that tugging at the heart these days. They just don't pay quite enough attention to it. Now, this is a short story here, but I can remember a time when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And of course, this is before my mom had gotten married. It was just the two of us, just my mother and I. My biological father had pretty much bailed the moment he found out about me, so that just left us. Now, at the time, I didn't quite understand why I only had one parent and so many of my cousins had both. I didn't mind too much though. My mother was and still is an irreplaceable rock star when it comes to being a mother and a grandmother. Together, we lived in a little, very neat and tidy 2-bedroom apartment, which wasn't too far from my grandparents' house. So we spent a lot of time over there with them almost every single day. Why? Because family was there. Believe it or not, I actually had 8 uncles and 4 aunties, all of which who had kids of their own. So there was never a shortage of love, attention, or even help for those of us who were willing to receive it from the family. Well, that being said, when I was in preschool, leading up to about 3rd grade or so, every year the school would have these little events like muffins for moms or coffee for grands. This was just the way that the school would give back to the students by having them share a little bit of their morning with their families before going to class, of course. And I just remembered thinking it was always so fun and it's just such a cute little thing to do. And as a matter of fact, they are still carrying on these same exact events. Literally, my kid brought home a flyer a couple of weeks ago because they were doing the coffee for grandparents. And boy, did that bring back memories. Whew, but I digress. Let's get back on target here. In lieu of having these special days, they also had another one that they would do every year, which was called Donuts for Dads. Every year, you'd see dads walking to the cafeteria while holding hands with their little girls, and then they'd sit down with their daughters and listen to them go on and on about the pictures they had drawn in class or how their best friend was sitting at the table next to them with their dad. Those fathers would smile and periodically throw in comments like, "Oh, that's great, sweetheart," or "Wow, you did a wonderful job on drawing this, princess." Taking a few sips of coffee here and there and finishing their donut, they'd glance down at their watch on the wrist and gently say to their little girl, "Sweetheart, this was the absolute best breakfast ever. I had so much fun with you, but guess what? I love you so much, but I have to leave. It's time for me to go to work. But Dad's gonna see you at home tonight for dinner, okay?" And then with that, he'd kiss her on the forehead and be on his way. And I just remembered thinking to myself, they seemed so happy to be spending that time together. And they were what I thought daddies and daughters were supposed to look like in a relationship sense. Goodness, I can still see every moment of that playing back in my mind. Why? Because one year, while all of this was going on between a little girl and her father, I sat at the other end of the table watching and listening so intently to their conversation. I sat there wondering why I didn't have a dad to share my school pictures with, or why he didn't want to know about all the friends I'd made at school. I was the lonely little girl who sat at the table with a long face and a blue compartmentalized cafeteria tray in front of her. I sat there feeling a little embarrassed and feeling a lot more left out of being a part of a full family unit, or the kind of family unit I pictured in my head at least. In addition to this, though, can I just also say that when God senses our loneliness, He longs to make us feel whole, and so many times He goes out of His way to remind us that we are still loved, even as adults. Well, that's exactly what He did for me. The lonely little girl who was sitting at the table by herself, staring at the blue cafeteria tray. He made sure to show up just for her. Now remember, I told you guys early on how many uncles I had. Well, as I sat there, all the way across the other side of the cafeteria, I could hear one of the monitors say, "Oh, you're looking for Chrissy? She's sitting over there at that table, just right over there." And as a kid, you can hear your name all the way across the room, right? It's the same way as if a mother is on one side of a room and a million people are talking. But as soon as she hears her baby cry, she knows that it's her baby. When I looked in her direction, I could see her pointing at me. But not only that, my Uncle Harold was walking towards me. And he wasn't alone. I could see that one of his best buddies, James was his name, he was tagging along with him, waving me down and walking right behind my uncle. When they finally got to the table, Uncle Harold said, "How's it going, kiddo? I'm not too late, am I?" He rubbed the top of my head and ruffled up my cute little ponytail a little bit. I didn't care though. I was so happy and elated to see the both of them, but absolutely him because he was one of my beloved uncles. "What are you doing here?" I asked him. "Well," he said, "I was talking to your mom on yesterday, and when she told me that your school was doing the donuts for dads, well, I asked her if she thought you'd mind me filling in. And speaking of the donuts, where are they anyway?" He said that and laughed a little bit. That morning had started out with me feeling a little glum and downhearted. But seeing their faces had turned my whole morning around. However, it didn't end there. As Uncle Harold and his friend James were standing near the tables full of different varieties of donuts, chocolate donuts, glazed donuts, donuts with sprinkles, and of course, coffee, I turned around to see another very familiar face walking in my direction. "Uncle Clyde?" I blurted out. "What are you doing here?" I asked him. "Well, I was over Mama's and Joanne, that's my mother's name. She told me that you were having donuts for dads this morning, and I just wanted to drop in with you for a bit." Before I could even get the words out to tell him that Uncle Harold and his friend James was also there, they walked up and all three of them shared the heartiest laugh you'd ever hear, filling up a whole cafeteria. Neither of them knew that the other person had decided to come and stand in the gap that morning. Guys, I had gotten a double portion. And you know what? I could sit here and tell you that the best part of that morning was laughing with my uncles and sharing with them all the awesome things that I was doing in school. I could even tell you that the donuts were really yummy and that it was the best breakfast ever. The most important thing that I remember on that day, though, was that I had a village, a family who was willing to prioritize the feelings and the experience and the heart of an innocent little girl who didn't have a present father of her own. They were willing to stand in the gap so that I could feel special, wanted, and important. They decided to take that responsibility into their own hands of stepping into a role that wasn't theirs to begin with. So for that moment and every year afterwards, there was never a time where I felt like I was missing something on the Donuts for Dads Day, because God would always send someone who was willing to show up and be present in the moment with little old me. So to my listeners, I pray that on today, you remember what kind of power and support a village can provide. Together, we can all work to cultivate friendships and other relationships, joy and peace, safety and comfort. The benefits of having a devoted village is absolutely endless. So let's not deprive each other of the love that we can freely give and receive every day, because it should be readily available, much like the same way that Jesus gives to us unconditionally. So to all of you, thank you again for listening to today's podcast episode, and I pray that all of you have the absolute very best week ahead. Oh, wait, and before I forget though, let me just add another quick reminder for those of you listening. If you'd like to subscribe to Never Thirst Again, you can do so through Amazon Music at www.amazonmusic.com/Never Thirst Again. You can do so on Spotify, Podbean, and as mentioned before, a host of other platforms that will also be available in the description of this episode. Thanks again, everybody. Take care and God bless.